Today we are joined by 4 coastal carving artists from very diverse specialties and backgrounds. They're coming in from their homes and studios. Looks like Dorion's out there on the lawn, on the yard there somewhere. It's good. They will each be showing and speaking about their current projects that are that we're called in the making. We'll learn a little bit about wood carving, plaster, bone carving, and the importance of Nuu-chah-nulth language to Nuu-chah-nulth art forms. We'd like to welcome Dorion Reves, Jane Woodbury, Joshua Prescott, and George Rammell for being here today and providing us a window into your artistic practices. I myself am really eager to hear this, and we look forward to hearing your presentations. We're going to start with Dorion, then Jane, Joshua, and finally George. And we're going to open it up for questions after. So we're going to give some of these artists who very generously agreed to share their time and their work, some of their practice with us. And you could be putting some questions in the chat if you'd like, but we're going to hold that to the end after we hear from each of the artists who join us. But if you're, or maybe you could write it down, however you like to do it, it's fine. But we won't get to that till after we've had a chance to hear from each of them. So again, welcome for anyone who might have joined in the last couple of minutes. Welcome our guests, please. And Dorion, please take it away for us. Thank you. Drew.
Thank you very much for having me. I'd like to start by thanking the Nuu-chah-nulth First Nations, specifically the Colloquial First Nation, who are the traditional hosts and inspiration for this festival. As well, I'd like to thank all of the organizers and builders of the Carving on the Edge Festival as well. And I'd also like to thank the Sayshot and Hupachasat First Nations, whose lands we live and play and work on here. And we are so grateful and thankful for that.
If we can, we're gonna be nimble here. Sometimes things require that of us. And Jane, would you be prepared to jump in a little bit ahead of schedule here? And let's hope Dorion's able to join back in. Would that work for you? Looks like we have you on mute there. Jane, sorry, we got you. Can we unmute? Jane, can you hear me? I think we have you on mute, Jane. No, we still can't hear you. This is we're in the wilds of doing a carving festival on Zoom. Half of the time is managing the mute button. Okay, Jane's on it. I'm gonna hunt that mute button down. Almost there. The perseverance of the mute button.
Here you are. Let's see if it was fun. Switch back over to me because we kind of have an ember burning here.
Oh, we do. Okay. All right.
Hello?
All right. Yeah, Dorion. I don't see Dorion in my view here. I don't know. Let's go back here. There you are. Okay. Oh, look at that. Okay, Jane, thank you. Sorry. We'll come back to you in a minute here. We'll go back to Dorion. We lost you for a bit there, Dorion, and you're vertical, but that's just fine. And you were able to make the fire spirit come alive there. We've lost you again. All right. Fire. Beautiful. Ah.
Fire.
Yay. Hey. Yay.
Yeah, fire.
We have fire.
Scooped up here. There we go.
Okay.
Oh, sorry about this.
Oh, he's got, I don't know, whoever's got Dorion's phone there or iPad, whatever that is, could you turn it the other way? Mm. Jane, did you find your mute button?
That better?
Oh,
There we are.
that's better. Thank you. Well, yeah, that's good.
Better?
That's better. Thank you. Okay. Dorion, can you hear us? Oh, this is great.
Having
It's
thrown.
it's such a wonderful idea to be out there starting us
You
off.
would.
Just getting one word at a time here.
I just wanted to say, my main reason for lighting this fire was in a spirit of community and sharing, and also to demonstrate the fire lighting kit, which I'm donating to the festival.
Oh,
We'll
yeah.
come have. If you're still with me there,
I'm not sure if we are still with you.
Barely.
We're about 30% there with you.
Too bad.
Oh,
One of the glitches of internet.
yeah. The internet gods are being tricksters right now. Jane, were you able to find your mute button there? Could you unmute yourself? You're still on mute there. Oh, this is fun. Okay, who's next in our list here? Joshua, we may go to you, so be prepared at any moment here. You look ready to go there. We might have to wrestle this out that way if that's okay. Thank you for nodding.
Yeah, I'm ready.
All right, okay. Okay, you know what? I'm gonna make an executive decision here. We're gonna go to Joshua here. We'll come back to Jane, hopefully to Dorion as well. Okay, this is a good practice of patience here. None of us thought we'd ever be doing a carving festival virtually. Here we are. Thank you for your graces and good spirit and good energy. Joshua, please, if you would, thank you for stepping in out of order, so to speak. And let's hear from you now. Thank you. Chu.
Chu. Yeah. Way chuch. Lakshi ich na ata haklich us. In haklak na kwapkin hisahku. Unuk sawa in hita hishuk na hita up na uapkun zitzakiakin kwachakukpin. Hishuk na mishai. Bishaintana anahai. Hishuk na histakshik haslapi hatwith si hatwith. Kwakla missing shikskun mamuk. Wik each hiniha. Chani aks nishsap. Yakwithits wawa. Wawitasis. Don't worry, guys. I'm going to translate into English what I just said. So I said, let me see if I got this right. Welcome all of you. I'm really happy that there's many of us here together. I said, it's really important what we're doing here. All of us win when we share our language and when we share our culture, our cultural teachings, our ways of being. Chari masas atik shik yakit it as hisham yuk nihil. I want to thank the ones that gathered us here today. Yukwa masas atik shik yakit it as aashai uatup Carving on the Edge Festival. I want to thank the ones that are always planning on behalf of the Carving on the Edge Festival. Uatup Nitwa for us. Yuqua Masas Atik Shik Tishad, Hoop Ajas At, Hiyat Tumas. I want to thank Tishat and Hoop Ajas At. I live in Port Alberni. Let's see, Wa Masas Uts Ish Ahku Hahosi, Tishat Hoop Ajas At. This is their territory. Yuqua Masas Atik Shik Michtakokin. Ya Atkin As Hohtak Sapiet. I want to thank our elders that are always teaching us their language, our language, Nuu-chah-nulth language. Kluyati Atsleep Maxti and Uk Misoksas Na Uakus Yakusitis Hohtakshia. I'm really happy. I always have a fun time sharing what I'm learning. Ohwas Aks Ahku Sashtup Tithamin. I'm going to use these pretend animals. Himwitsa Aks. I'm going to tell a story. Perhaps story is not exactly the right word to use for Himwitsa. To Ahku ish chachstumsmit, chastumsmit, chachstumsmit wa'at, himwitz akletku. This is son of mink. We say chachstumsmit when we're telling himwitza stories. Kla uish kla wa'at. This is a frog. Wa'as ukla. Her name is Lady Frog. Ayachisna hohtak quachu it chachstumsmit quin ichik uquishwa it us. A lot of us know how son of mink desires Lady Frog. Uts hank masa, he wants to marry her. To nawayasitwa ishwa itas klupa anahainawayas. So Lady Frog was sitting. Nawayas is it sort of means like you're just sitting there existing, observing and taking in all of creation. Nawayasitwa ishwa itas Nazi chek chastum smit upkaksul yatsuk. So she saw son of mink whistling while he was walking. Nazi chek chastum smit wa it us. Yatsins ichek ukwith wa it us. He walked up to Lady Frog. Tik shek chastum smit. What it us, Upmhas upchasutil, Wik takmap shake, what it us. Wik masa umap. She didn't say anything, she didn't pay attention to him. Tekwas shake, upchas shik, what it us chachstumsmit. He sat down beside her. Tik shake who asked chachstumsmit. What it does, Papa Pax Pista Kaksuchinak itk. Lady Frog, I really like your green dress. Wik masa umap yekai. Tik shake who asked. What it does, See yaks hissatush. What's a saksuk? Me think shiksum nish. He said to Lady Frog. I'm really handsome and you're very beautiful. We should become a couple. What it does? Victim sus Nazi chicks quatus quayik lutzma. Me think shiksum nish. Hayhen me think shik. So he said to her, I've never seen a woman as beautiful as you. We should become a couple. Can we become a couple? Umap sheikh wa it us. She started to pay attention to him. Kapapkacha wawamit it mit. I guess she liked what he was saying. What's a sish? Takasum. Yes, I'm beautiful. Keep going, keep going. Now, hi, Johnny. Let's see. Pardon me, I got a little bit lost here. What it is? Me think shik. We mark matakna me think shik. When like wa. So she said, maybe we can't become a couple. And he said, why? Why are you saying that? When like wa. When tin we makna me think shik. Why can't we become a couple? We makna me think shik in Please nish. We can't become a couple because we're different. We mataksuk qua apias uwa etmin crew. Maybe you can't do what the other frogs can do when it becomes evening time. Huh. Crew. What do you guys do when it's the evening time? Oh, noon. Nook nishas, who's a nishas, two when nishas, his okay. Ho took shakes crew, uyek na hawek, cock shakes crew. We sing, we dance at the lake when it's nighttime. We're not finished until morning, till the break of dawn. Huh. Haisum sakwa apwa Smith. Chu, what's a team quad? Okay, shooting what crew. Chu, who ye kin? So she told him, okay, go to the lake then when it becomes evening time. And he says, okay, I'll see you there. Yat shake chastum smith, yat yek utachik aki, hatis shake. He started bathing. Hatis shake, clip shake. He started washing his face. Sach shake. Such get this high brush. Sach shake. Hapum yumum. He started brushing his fur. No hu masa uatupwa it as. He wanted to get spiffed up for Lady Frog. Now hi check huyu it luchink luchinuak uyi yat shake utachik uki. Nazi check ayak wa it his uki. Sawa I check at wa itas chachstam smith. I forget where I translated to. So he bathed, brushed his hair, washed his face, and then he waited for it to be nighttime. And then once it was nighttime, he went to the lake. When he got to the lake, he saw lots of frogs there, and Lady Frog came up to him. She came close to him. Wambit itskin haisuk qua up. Who she quat? Nunuk she. So she said to him, you told me that you can do it. Start dancing, start singing. Chu tuchwachik, hushik. He started jumping and dancing. And then he started singing. Hoo-ya, 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 hoo-ya. Hoo-ya, 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 hoo-yay, ho, 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 ho-yay, hoo-ya, hoo-yay, hoo-ya, hoo-ya, hoo-yay, hoo-ya, 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 hoo-yay, ho, ho, ho. Hash chick Aston Smith. He started panting really heavy. We marks, Wait, Max, the qua apwa akchachstamsmit. I can't do it, he said. Pardon me. Sa chik hapshik. He crawled away and hid in imha kacha in we max qua up qua apia kla uwa etmin wa at takums. So he crawled away and hid. He was embarrassed. I guess he was embarrassed because he couldn't do what the other frogs could do. Wa atna as a ichamakin. We yatwa ish honest ishet yakwisit it meeting shik masa. We max cook please hind crew us. So our elders always tell us, don't just enter a relationship with anybody. You can't do it if you're too different. We maksuk please hind sup ukwichis. Uetup yakwisit it meeting shik masa. You can't change yourself. I might not be saying this properly. Wa masas, I want to say you can't change yourself to make someone else like you or love you. We maksuk please hind sup ukwichis. Uetup klaui. Let's see. Ya akmisuk sumna kui it nas kui it hasapi hatwith. Wa masas love what the Creator has given you. Love who you are. Love yourself. Ya ukuchis. Love yourself. Uchakish hai uetup klahaksak. This is used for teaching our young people to love themselves, that you don't have to change yourself to make someone else love you or like you. To hymns. That's the story. That's my little presentation. So I guess if anyone has any questions, feel free to ask your questions and I'll answer them to my best ability.
Well, thank you. Thank you for your story. We'll probably just come back to questions if we can toward the end. And I'm not sure, did Dorian make it back? Can't see my view here.
Are we on?
Dorian, there you are. Joshua Clicko.
Clicko, Joshua.
Thank you, Clicko. Dorian, we thank you. We lost you a couple times there. Thank you for making fire for this time together. I just heard before we lost you that you were gifting your fire kit to the Carving on the Edge Festival. I think that's what I heard, but maybe you could just start there if you recall what you were saying. And we didn't hear anything else after that. So.
Okay, great. Thank you. So yeah, I'm gifting this fire set for raffle, and it's made all from materials from my property, except for, forgive me, the jute twine and the deer skin. And so it's meaningful to me in that I like to explore traditional ways, and I love wood and the fact that you can rub two pieces of wood together and make fire if you have the right skills and material. I find that to be quite intriguing, and I'd like to share it with as many people as I can. And so on my website, which will be coming up in the next couple months, I will be offering a child size fire kit at half price, as well as donating one per year to any communities that are interested. So it's my pleasure to sort of promote any kind of traditional practices which connect you with nature. I find it very therapeutic. Thank you. And now I'd like to go over just a couple of items. I don't know if you saw that last time, if that came out on the previous one, but I'll just go over what's in the kit basically. You have a spindle, and it's critical that you keep the spindle dry, as well as the hearth board. Those are the two most important, as well as your tinder obviously has to be very dry. Your bow and your pivot block can be damp, and that's okay. But the other ones must be dry or the moisture will transfer and you'll never get a fire lit. So the one other thing I just wanted to mention was this is the pivot block, which is in the set, is actually modeled. You'll notice it's very similar to a traditional small size splitting wedge, which would traditionally usually be made out of, say, elk antler or bone. But the shape is designed to be able to get into the crux of the fire pocket to get out the ember in case the ember is stuck there and you need the powder to come free. So that's what this block is about. And that's the only difference of my kit from anybody else's really, except that mine's all handmade with all local materials. So hopefully that explains that. And now let's get to what we really like and love, which is exploring different items of use, traditional items. So this year I made a spear, which is very special in design. I'll show you the head here. It's got quite a bit of bone work in it, and the tines are flexible in order to allow you to extract the fish once you've speared it. And just briefly, we'll talk about the history of this spear as we know it. I want to mention that history is always incomplete for the most part. So we just take from it what we can, what we find that's useful, that's provable. So in history, we found these type of bone points all over the world, and they assume that they were for a spear of this style. And so this spear is actually well dated into the Stone Age and probably well back before that. So the oldest example of this that's been found is over 5,500 years old. And the other thing I want to mention about this style of spear is that it was shared, this technology was shared all the way around Canada, which I find really amazing and intriguing. It was used on the coast here, and it even developed with a removable head, a harpoon style removable head for really large salmon, where you knew that if you tried to pull them out of the water, it would likely break your spear components. Therefore, you would have a removable head on a line that would allow you to draw in the fish with a little bit more ease, maybe in an easier area as well. It's also used in conjunction with a jig stick, and a jig stick is used with a lure or potentially bait to bring the fish up to the surface where they could then be speared. And you can actually watch real footage of this filmed in basically 1919 or 1920 from a really great film, which I highly recommend. It's Nuu-chah-nulth. It was actually shown in a lot of schools. But it is actually a really, really great movie. It shows traditional Inuit life. It also shows spears and tools like paddles. If you happen to watch Nuu-chah-nulth, I say please pay attention to his kayak paddle. You might be as intrigued as I am as a design geek on tools and implements. You'll notice, if you know anything about kayak paddles, that his paddle is a combination of a Greenland style paddle tip and an Aleut style kayak paddle, which has a hard center ridge line down it, which adds strength and balance to the paddle. And his paddle is actually a combination of both, which I find very intriguing as well, because he's basically located halfway between Greenland and the Aleutian Islands. So quite interesting to me. I wanted to show you these bone jig points. I was very excited about doing the bone points on the spear, and that inspired me to try to make some hooks. And this one is interesting because I didn't really do anything to it. I utilized the natural shape of the bone to be the natural tie-off points. So it was really easy to make and also very strong because none of the bone has been cut into enough to weaken it. So that goes on the jig stick with perhaps some bait, and you can jig the fish up to the surface where it may be speared. I also want to mention that the inspiration for this spear comes from the book Cedar. This is an amazing book. I recommend this to everybody, but especially if you live in the Pacific Northwest. This book is really amazing and full of information which you probably will not find anywhere else. It was recommended to me by an inspirational person in my life who also made these tools for me. And I can't thank him enough for his inspiration as well as these tools that he has shared with me here. And so I'd like to start with the spear and explain the tools that I use for the spear and the jig stick. So basically, this adze we have here was the #1 tool. I have them arranged in the order that they were used, actually. So this adze did 90% of the work. It did all of the shaping of the harpoon shaft. It did all of the shaping of the U-tines, except for the final knife work. It also did the roughing in of the jig stick as well. So it was the most used and the most critical, as well as the funnest to use and the most efficient by far. I can't say enough good things about an elbow adze, and then we'll get to the hook knives as well. But the elbow adze is absolutely amazing. I'm really looking forward to using the hand adze as well. I haven't tried that one yet, but I am blown away by the efficiency of the elbow adze. It removes material so quickly, yet so accurately. You can remove just a tiny amount and you can really make things flat and consistent, as well as remove a lot of material. And so the second most important piece was the knife, and the knife did all the finished work. There was no sanding done on all this. And I also want to point out that the knife did the drilling of the ferrule for the tip as well. And I drilled the tip of it with a hand that pairs nicely with one of the bow drills, and you can run this like a power drill with the bow from the fire kit. So that's how we created this maple ferrule here. And that was really amazing because it was a wet piece of wood. And so it was sort of a shrink pot scenario where you make it really large, and then as it dried, it shrank down over 1/4 of an inch in circumference on the end. So that was quite nice, and it allows for the tip to be replaced, as well as it can come off and a new tip can be placed in the end of this shaft, which has a 3-pointer blunt end and a nice leading down to it. So it's versatile and it can be switched over to metal if need be, but I really love the bone, and that's why I went the extra effort to make that work. And I just want to show that the opposite end here has a chisel point, which is used for digging or perhaps getting bait or shellfish off the rocks, that kind of a thing. So I just wanted to have some utilitarian balance as well to the other end in case you needed to grab at the back and have something secure to grip on. The spear is usually used with the head placed just beneath the surface of the water and then lunge when the appropriate time comes. So the other thing I'll just mention about this spear that I love is the integrity of the ties. When you tap one end, the tines on the other end vibrate. And that shows the integrity of the whole spear, that it's all basically one piece. And that's good to know if you're going to actually go for it. So that's pretty much the spear, and the bone jigs go with it. And I just want to say that it's a pleasure exploring this particular style of spear, and I wanted to say I also have intentions of making a completely 100% Western red cedar one as well, and utilizing the flexible branches of the cedar for the tines. Yeah, so that's pretty much. The axe hardly got used. It was not, that's what I wanted to say. Sorry. I wanted to say that the whole spear could have been made with just these two tools here, with just the knife and the axe for sure. The file really helped the bone work. It wasn't 100% necessary, but it very much helped out the bone work to have the file. So I feel like the whole spear and everything could have been made with just those few items, including the wedge to split the yew wood. That was the critical part, right? That's what I used the axe for, was the splitting of the yew wood, as well as the splitting of the cedar when I went to make my joinery. The saw is great for cutting a straight line, and I love a good saw, but not necessary. Not necessary, really. It was nice to use, but I could have done without it. A good pair when it comes to doing a wrap. A net needle, which I carve myself, I find is a wonderful thing to use when doing lashings, and a good pair of non-toothed pliers is wonderful as well. But I will say this, if you were using real sinew, which I want to, and I'm looking for anybody who wants to teach the skills of preparing real sinews. If you did use real sinews, you could do away with these for sure, because you could pull the sinew between your teeth. You can grab sinew quite well with your teeth. Synthetic sinew, not so much. So I just wanted to mention that. And sharpening. Let's not forget that to do anything, you need sharp tools. So I wanted to include sharpening. This is literally everything it took to make this spear here. So we have sharpening, we have a pencil, we have a saw, a drill bit. Again, I used a clamp. The clamp was completely unnecessary. I could have used lashings and then taken those lashings back off again afterwards and rewrapped it. So the clamp again was not necessary, but it was used. So I kept everything that was used here. We have a total of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 items of tooling and 1 item of sharpening. So that said, I'll just go over just a couple other pieces to talk with you about the versatility of an elbow adze and a hook knife. So I'll start by showing you a deep ladle. So this is what can happen with an adze and a hook knife. You can create some very, very artistic shapes, let's say. You can create some very artistic shapes. And it's quite easy to do, which is the wonderful thing. So just wanted to show that you can do simple serving spoons like this. You know, something you could do just in a day, in a few hours, if you know, if you build your skills up. And so that leads me to this bowl here, and then we've got all the tools for the bowl here that I made it with. This platter is basically multi-use, so it'll stand up to dry, and it can be used as a cutting board as well, and then it can be used as a platter. And so it's just a fun thing. It's nothing special. It's still in the work. As you can see, it doesn't have its finished cuts on it, but it will soon. And it's just a fun exploration of some maple from my yard. And so with that said, I just want to say, again, thank you so much for the opportunity. And at this point, I'd also like to thank my filmographer, as well as the musician that we didn't get to hear all of his great song that he prepared for the show, but we did hear a little bit. And so I want to deeply thank Nicholas Waddell for all of his help today. And I'd like to thank everybody at Carving on the Edge and say it's been a real pleasure, and I look forward to seeing you guys again soon. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Clicko, Clicko. Thank you, Dorian, for taking us through some of your work there. Really appreciate it. Very insightful. Thank you. Joshua, you have your is it a hand?
Yeah, that was really awesome, man. Thank you for sharing that with us. I feel bad like I'm jumping in here, but I'm also a carver, and I have some pieces here that I wanted to show you guys as well. We can do it after. Like I said, I don't want to be jumping in on anybody, but
yeah, let's go now. Let's go for it. Then we'll go to Jane, who looks like got the
okay.
all there. So yeah, please show us a couple, and then we'll.
Yeah, so I've been learning to carve for over 20 years. I started carving when I was 14. This is a mask that I'm making. It's still not finished. It actually has a bird's head that goes on top, and it has wings. So this is one piece that I'm working on. I have a few little sort of like maskettes or miniature masks that I'm making. And I've been working on some raven rattles. This one here is a collaboration between me and a good friend of mine. His name's Peter Grant. He's a very good carver, well known in our carving community. So this is a raven rattle that we've been working on together, and it's just about ready for a paint job. Everything I carve is pretty much knife finished. I don't like sanding, sanding is, it's not healthy for us. Like you're breathing in all that dust and the little sanding particles, and I really like texture. So when everything's knife finished, you can see all the little knife strokes, and I really enjoy looking at that. And you can tell it's handmade. It takes more care and time because you're constantly sharpening your knives, depending on the level of finish, the quality of the finish you want. Like it takes time, just to have everything nice and clean and smooth, if that's what you're going for. So yeah, I just wanted to show you guys that I'm a carver as well. And I wanted to say as well that like I've been learning, some people are asking how long have I been learning to speak Nuu-chah-nulth, and I've been learning to speak Nuu-chah-nulth for maybe 11 or 12 years now. I'm trying to reach a level of conversational fluency. I'm not really sure if I'm there yet. I look to the fluent speakers to kind of tell me where I'm at, because they're fluent speakers, and you know, they're the only ones that really know sort of where I'm at in my speaking ability. But I think it was before my children were born, I started learning from my children's grandparents. They were all fluent speakers, and it was like a turning point. I was like, I want to learn as much as I can about my children's culture, so that I can teach them and pass them on, and so that they can pass it on to them, so that they belong, that they're whole human beings. They know where they come from, and you know, that sort of stuff. And I actually call it my own language now. Some people might be offended by that, but I call it my own language. And I've had elders that tell me, this lady asked me, she's like, whoa, where did you learn to speak Nuu-chah-nulth? And I was like, well, my children's family and Julia Lucas, and I've been adopted into the Lucas family. I'm actually being trained to be the Tsiqsi, Utsain Haiklikshith, Hatwithuk Haimayisat. So I'm being trained as a speaker for the chief of Haimayisat, Johnson, Klakish, or Haiklikshith. And so I said, I'm not from here. And she said to me, she's like, stop. She's like, don't say that ever again. She's like, we see what you're doing. We see you teaching children. She's like, you're a part of us. And so that was like a growth moment for me of like learning to accept myself. And, you know, like today I'm still learning to accept myself and love myself and realize my self-worth. And that's why I typed in the chat, like, this is heart work. This is what's going to heal us. And together we can all heal and become stronger, like I was saying before. Like I can talk all day, so I better stop there. But I just wanted to show you guys that I carve too. And yeah, thank you.
Okay, thank you. I see there's some questions coming in. Thank you. We're going to, you know, it's never clear how one should structure these kind of things. We're in the midst of a grand experiment here. So we did sort of head in the direction of having everyone speak first, then we'll go to questions, pros and cons to that, but here we are. So Jane, we see you, you're here. I think we can hear you. Thank you for your patience and your perseverance. And please take the piece here, and the floor is yours.
Good. Can you hear me now?
Yes, very good. Thank you.
Good. Okay. Hello, everybody out there, and thank you for having me. And I'm situated on Manitoulin Island. This is Anishinaabe territory and home of the Ojibwe, Odawa, and Potawatomi peoples. And I am working on a few different things and just finishing them. And Brianne's going to help me here by bringing up some slides. I work for a beautiful art gallery here in South Baymouth. And we carry locally made arts and crafts, expressly the arts of and crafts of the Anishinaabe peoples. And often over the years, Brenda's been collecting pieces that became too damaged to sell. And so she gives them to me. So this was a pipe that was gifted to me by my friend Brenda. And the tip is Brazilian soapstone. So when I inherited it, it was the shape of an eagle, but had no detail at all. It didn't have eyes, it didn't have nostrils, nothing. It was just a plain shape with just the two ears on the top. So the first thing I did was go in and carve the chamber on the piece. Now for that, I use palm tools, particularly a skew. And I went in and did the design. I love that I did the eye on the underneath. So yeah, and so this is quite a small piece. That's only about 2.5 inches, maybe 3 inches long. And then once the form is established and the details, I use files that are ordinarily used for carving waxes for jewelry. These are just great on soapstone. They can also be used on wood. And again, they're very small, so they're good for detail. And on the next slide, you're going to see how I also masked off the stem of the pipe. And it was also trimmed with some deer hide. So that's all masked off so that as I use the wet and dry, I'm not going to affect the wood on the stem. And then I use sandpaper and 400 wet dry. You can go on to the next slide. And then what I do is I'm dipping that in water all the time. Now by dipping it in water, you get to see what it's going to look like finished. Yeah, you can go to the next one. So when you dip it into the water, you can see with that Brazilian soapstone, when it's dry, you can't really see even the color of the soapstone, nor can you see any of the minute details of the piece. But when you wet it, as you're using your 400 grit, you can really see it coming up. At this point too, you get to see where, especially on a small piece like this, which is kind of like carving for jewelry, you get to see where you've got scratches that maybe need to be worked out. Next slide is, yeah, so what I'm working on right now is just the stem of the piece. While I'm doing the sanding, I also do not touch the bowl in the chamber. What you're seeing now is called the chamber of the pipe. The bowl is where you put your tobacco. And so I have that masked off when I'm doing the finishing so that this piece is finished in the sea wench combo that comes out of Tofino. It's beautiful for wood, and it also works on the soapstone, this Brazilian soapstone, which is excellent because this soapstone is so soft that it scratches quite easily. So you want to get a protection on there. And so today what I'm going to do is we can leave the shared screen. I am going to, yeah, so there's a good look at just one coat of the wax. And we can stop the share screen there. So what I'm going to do is the stem, which I've already carved out on here. And I did just kind of like a twisting motion, almost as if it were like a turned piece. So I've already this morning, I put 1 coat of linseed oil on there. And now what I'm going to do is, I really like the color. It doesn't really accent the sort of green brown of the chamber, the carving on the chamber. So I'm going to go in and just do a little bit of antiquing. And what I've got is some burnt umber mixed with linseed oil. So I'm going to go in with a fine brush. And also when you're finishing, I do my finishing all at the same time. When you're doing your finishing, you don't want to be doing any sanding, monkeying around, dusting your floors, nothing. But a nice pristine area so that there's no dust or filings or anything of that sort. So this has been coated once. So I'm going to just go in now and I'm going to lightly fill in the grooves with a little bit of the burnt umber. I do watercolor paintings, so kind of when my brushes lose their spring or their point, I keep them for this. I also have a mop brush on hand to pick up anything I don't want, and just some plain linseed as well. And the other thing I use a lot of when I'm doing finishing is cheesecloth. Why cheesecloth? Because it has no lint, and other fabrics do. So I'm going to just go in here and do a little bit of coating. And that's going to kind of help bring up the color a little bit. And then I can get some cheesecloth and just give that a nice wipe down, sort of see where I'm heading and going with the piece. When you're using oil paints for tinting, wood or painting on wood, you have to also keep in mind that you've got to work fat over lean. And lean means that in your finish, you've got turpentine makes it lean, mineral spirits make it lean. And the more oil you have, like the linseed oil or tung oil or poppy oil, the more you have, the fatter it is. So when you start out, let's say you're doing a wash, you have a little bit of terp in there to make it lean or mineral spirit. And then you add, as you do your second layer, let's say you let your first layer dry for a few days. Then when you go in, you're going to make it fatter. You're going to add no turpentine, just linseed oil, or poppy oil is even richer and thicker. Or there's different mediums too, like dryers, etc., that can be used. So as I go, you can see I'm just kind of giving that a little more depth along the stem. Now I don't know what wood this was carved out of. I know that it's a branch of a tree. It's possibly birch. A lot of this Brazilian soapstone came from Taiandanega, from Mohawk country. We carry a lot of the carving in the Brazilian soapstone that comes from there. And so there, now I'm going to just go in. I keep a mop brush, a brush that is nice and clean. And I'm going to just give it an overall kind of wipe down. And again with the cheesecloth, so that you're not bringing lint onto your surface. Now, when you're attaching tints and colors to wood that you've just carved, I always put a layer of linseed first. Otherwise, the colors tend to clutch a little too heavily. In other words, the raw wood is so absorbent that you put that color on and boy, it sinks right in. So then you have trouble moving it around or removing it. And of course, you're at a point in the piece where you can't sand it. So what I do is I give it a coat of linseed or tung oil, whatever oils you're using first, and then kind of add to it. So I'm going in there and I'm just going to add a little more pigment. And this is just Winsor, and I use Winsor and Newton paints a lot. I'm English, so it's part of my patriotic effort, I suppose. And then with the brushes, when you're doing this, you don't want to use cheap brushes, because if you do that, sometimes you'll lose a bristle as you go, and that's really difficult. I keep a little pair of tweezers on hand for when that happens, so that I can pluck that pluck that off. So now I'm going to go in with my mop brush and just kind of remove where I don't want that color to be. And also with my cheesecloth too. So right now for this first coat, I just kind of want it to be resting in the grooves that I've carved. And that's going to help bring up the detail on the stem. When I got this pipe, it's covered in rabbit fur for about halfway down. So I took that right off. I'm gonna utilize it back into the work, but not as much of the fur. And then I bought some beads. Here we have Lillian's Gifts in Chiging, and Lillian caters to bead workers. The Anishinaabe people are famous for their beadwork, and so her assortment of beads is just beautiful. So roughly that does it for that first coat. It's just going to add in, you can see, a little bit of color, and then give it another coat of linseed oil as well. And then I can work it up when I have a little more time. The next thing we can show another couple of slides here. I inherited quite a few things this year from the gallery. And another one is a walking stick. So the walking stick has two pieces to it. The one you're seeing now is the handle of the walking stick. And you can see it has a peg, and that peg will eventually go into the staff or the actual stick part of the walking stick. I think this too is birch. When I put a layer of linseed oil on it today, and it's just beautiful, the grain. I was going to antique it, but I don't think I'm going to now. We could go to the next slide on that one. So you can see the whole of the top of the walking stick, which I designed for my own hand. And it's so comfortable. It fits just beautifully. And again, this was done using a straight knife, a large one to start out with, and then a detailed one, as well as rasps and rifflers. Now, the thing about using the rasps is that you end up with a lot of small scratching in the surface, especially this is fairly soft, the birch here that I'm working with. So that requires a lot of sanding, different grades of just the regular sandpaper, and going from like a 100 and right up to a 220. We could go to the next slide of this. So you can see this is the bottom, and it is also carved. I took a good look at it today. So there it is there. I'll kind of see if you can move it in closer. But it's almost, the bottom is almost like a turning itself. And it just gets smaller and smaller. I was going to oil it today, but it still has some sanding that needs to be done. It still needs a bit of sanding. Okay, and then the next piece. Oh yeah, it's got a leather thong that's gonna go through it. So you can see where it joins up there, the top to the bottom. Now this is a totally abstract piece, and I don't think I've ever done any abstract work in carving. Drawing and painting I often do, but in the carving I can't recollect ever having carved anything that was completely abstract. So I'm really enjoying that, just the form of it. And today when I oiled it, I was gonna do the antiquing, and I like it too much just as it is. You see there that's carved with the straight knife and then shaped with a wood rasp, a flat rasp, as well as I have some that are curved as well. And now that I'm really looking at it, I don't think I'm going to antique it. I think I'm going to just leave it alone, put a few layers of linseed oil on to protect it, and then use that blend from Sea Winch. That's a beautiful blend. It just polishes things right up. And a fellow artist taught me that I can use that wax over oil, which I didn't know I could do. And we could go on to the next one. Next slide. Yeah. And so there you see the bottom of the staff. And that staff is about, well, it's about, with the top, it's about 4.5 feet tall. And so right down, it's, you know, carved right down to the bottom. And when I got that, it was not carved. There was no detail on it. It was just like working away on the abstract forms. Next slide. I kind of forget. Yeah, and for that kind of detailing, picking up a couple of packs of emery that you use for nail is nice. It's got the 2 different grits on it, so you can go in and get into those small spaces, you know, especially like the top here. If if you see like the details around those curved areas, it's pretty tight. So there's the that's one trick for sanding the detailed areas. Next slide. On there. Yeah, so this is the yellow cedar burl that was turned into by my friend Keith Hunley, and it's now in the finishing stages, and I'm painting and tinting it again using oil paint and linseed oil, and then finally I'm going to wax it. The next slide. This was started at the Carving Festival in Tofino in 2017. I've been working on a big solo show as well as helping to completely redo an art gallery here. So I haven't been doing that much carving. And the burl wood is really tough to carve, really tough to carve. Here I am roughing out the design on the burl wood at the festival in 2017. Us women had the floor that year, which was just awesome. And even when I was roughing it out, I never carved burl wood before. I began to see areas that were really compromised. And here you can see I used the shape as much as I could, you know, of the exterior of the piece of burl, and left bark in place and that kind of thing. But next slide. But as I progressed with the carving, I began to see that you can see that area there where my right hand is, where I'm carving. That turned out to be a really rotten area that went through quite a bit of the piece. So first of all, that compromises the stability of the piece, and in terms of its thickness and its durability, you know, if you're selling it, if you're going to ship it, that sort of thing. And in this case with the Buddha, what it did was it compromised the aesthetics of the face of the Buddha. Next slide on there. Yeah. And also on this piece, I picked up at Lee Valley Tools from one of their customer reps. I said to him, gee, I said, these diamond bits, I said, on the burl wood, there was like an oil in the wood. I hadn't used any oil, but there was an oil in the wood. And I was just loading those diamond burrs up, you know, repeatedly. There was no use for them at all. And then, you know, with the burl wood, it's tough to carve in the first place. And he said, you ever try the Typhoon Burs? These are a tungsten carbide. We could go on to the next slide, please. And there's a detail there, and there's the link. And these things in the Fordham or the Dremel are just magic. I mean, they zip right through. The red here is very aggressive. The points on it are a little deeper. And so it's powerful for wasting away, roughing out, shaping. And then the next slide is going to show you, I think, the blue. And so the blue burr is smoother. And they say it leaves it as smooth as a good sandpaper, but not really, but it is quite a bit smoother. And the size of that one, really, it's like drawing with a paintbrush is the only way I can describe it. And Keith had also gifted me a large red cedar urn. And that piece is so old and it was so brittle that as I began to carve it, it would just tear away. And I'm good at sharpening tools and all that jazz. I learned to sharpen tools from Henry Nola, and Henry made his own tools. So it didn't matter, you know, how sharp the tool was. It didn't matter what direction you came at the piece. It was just ripping it apart. And there was these, it was like the oil was crystallized. Now, somebody said to me that that's because the cedar itself is old. I don't know if that's so. We could have the next slide on that one. So you can see that is predominantly done. I mean, I go in with the straight knife and do some work, but that is predominantly done using the Typhoon Burs on the Rammell and the Fordham. Next slide. That's a detail of hands on an oar. It's an underwater fantasy, and some mer people are making off with the paddles of the traditional paddlers in the canoe. You can see the mermaid's tail there. So that, like I say, that's predominantly done with the Typhoon Burs. And the next slide on that one, yeah, they're red, eh? So for stock removal, you know, like right into going in under, doing your undercutting, you know, going right in under the paddle, right in under the waves. When I didn't learn to carve from Henry. I learned to carve from my mother. My mother was an artist and she used to teach arts and crafts. So I learned to carve from her when I was a kid. I was about 13. But from Henry, I learned an awful lot about carving, you know, like what, you know, how to do an undercut, that sort of thing. I learned a lot about wood carving from him. So even with those burrs, you can get in there and get right underneath. And the next slide, next photo. Yeah, so there's a couple of close-ups. So you can see there, that's using more of the blue with the smoother finish. Now at the same time, I'm using hand tools and rasps and things to carve this piece. But as I say, there's areas on that piece that are simply you just can't, you couldn't do it. It just rips apart. As a matter of fact, there were places where it was just like carving end grain, you know, where it would just it could almost like crumble as I went on. Okay, next slide. Yeah, so there's a little bit about those Typhoon Burs, they're called. And it can also be used on plastics and composites, which is kind of amazing at the same time. And they don't load up. I mean, all you need is, you know, I have a bristle brush here, like a nail brush. And if they load up, you just clean them up. They don't come apart, anything like that. And you just have to watch it because they have different shank measurements for your Rammell and your Fordham. And they're one of my favorite discoveries of late. Next slide. Okay, so this is the Buddha, and I call it soul free. This was turned by Keith. So you can see on this slide that big gash or that big empty area as it comes up into the ear there. So this is what I am doing is I built up that area with wood fillers. I just couldn't reconcile the aesthetics of that piece, leaving it with such a gash coming into the main face. So now what I'm doing is it's called faux painting or faux work. And again, here, what I did was I started out with a lean combination. That means terps and in this case, linseed oil mixed with oil paint. And I'm telling you to try and match those colors of natural wood. So difficult. My goodness. The other day I was so frustrated and finally I said, there's something wrong. It's just either too red, too pink, or too yellow. And I put a tiny touch of phthalo blue in with my terp and linseed and I got it. So I'll go in and I'll do a section, and then I also use burnt umber with a really fine lining brush to recreate the natural lines, etc., that move through the burl wood. Now this again takes a lot of patience, and it's fairly visible where the faux work is now. And again, that's just being patient, doing it layer by layer so you can obscure, you know, the fact that you had to do a buildup, or in lots of cases, like with a mask or whatever, with a bowl, if you get the walls of your bowl too thin, you may have to use a bit of paste and build it up. And yeah, so I'm just working away at that with the fine line brushes. Next slide on that one. Yeah, so there also is a detail from the periphery of the piece. And again, this was an area, once I started carving, it was just rotten. I mean, it had to come out. You know, somebody said to me, oh, you could do a thing of using 2-part epoxy, but then if you use 2-part epoxy to fill in those areas, you have to well the whole sculpture. There's the smell of it, the toxicity of it. And so again, with this, I used just the Lepage's wood filler. And, you know, and again, you have to build that up in layers. And so layer by layer, I built it up, and now the finishing stages of going in and toning that so that you can't see that there was a buildup. Next slide. And this is the underpainting for the eye of the Buddha. Now that looks really, really vivid. It jumps right out at you, like it's not congruent with the whole piece. But again, once I did that painting about 3 days ago, so once that is really, really dry, I can go in there and start antiquing it and playing with it and doing glazes over it. You're almost not going to be able to see the green in the eye. I wanted a little bit of green. I wanted the eye to stand out, because in the piece, the Buddha's looking at a butterfly which he's releasing from his hand. And so I want the eye to be a little bit more significant. And as I say, once that completely dries. Now, to add stability to that piece, I attached Luan, or you get like a 1/4 inch mahogany, to the back. I used a Gorilla Glue for construction to attach the pieces, and then used wood filler. Now this piece, because of the amount of rot moving through the burl wood, would have been way too fragile, way too fragile. I would have had to have redesigned the whole thing. And so this when you have that burl, like Keith turns these for the moon project we're working on, has 13 of us women doing 13 different moons. Ivy Martin did one, and I think Lavina Johns, if I can remember her name correctly, did another, and myself. And so, you know, he keeps that central section where, let's say, the face on my Buddha is fairly thick, but that edge piece is only maybe 1.25 inches deep. Here I have my wish list. This is the taper tip tuck. I found this just the other day. I'm always folding little bits of sandpaper all over the place, you know, and attaching them to little sticks or chopsticks or whatever, or kebab sticks. So this is an actual tool where it has like a belt of sandpaper that moves in a pen and is used for the finer sanding. And that's about it. I think we're near the end of the slides here. Yeah, there's a good shot of it. I thought, boy, that's ingenious, right? A detail sander. Now that I got that out of Woodworker magazine, and the only place I can find it is on Amazon. Lee Valley doesn't have it, so I've never seen it. And there's one of my great friends and teachers. And as Henry Nola would always say, have fun. And carving is that. It's so much fun. You know, during these times of isolation, people often say to me, oh, you know, how are you doing? You can't see family, can't see friends. I can't go to work, which I miss. I miss being at the gallery and interacting with the other artists here. and with people coming in to both look and buy art. But the being alone when you're an artist is not a difficult thing. It's the carving in itself is, you're very focused. It's a very meditative practice in a way, the carving. And so being alone is quite nice, just to do your own work and focus on it. And today watching Tim Paul in conversation with Gordon Dick, and Gordon Dick said to him, "I have to thank you for teaching me about allowing space." And I loved that, because my work is very crystalline. I do a lot of detail in the work, and it's time for a change for me. And I felt that when I was doing the abstract walking stick, that it's time to sort of let go of that particular technique of just really working detail. Henry used to say to me, all those curlicues. And the thing is with all those curlicues, when you're doing that type of work, there's an awful lot of finishing in the details there to that. How are we running time-wise on this? You want me to wrap it up?
I am not the keeper of the time right now, but I think getting some nods from the support team here.
Okay.
Yeah. So
Well, thank you so much for having me. Thank you to the board over there, your staff, the festival keepers. It's a wonderful event. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Chimagwich.
Chimagwich. Thank you for bringing all your good spirit, and it's really quite a fascinating range of work this morning, or this afternoon rather, that we've already covered. And thank you for sharing all of that. Really wonderful attention to detail, and some of your tool tips, good too. Good spokesperson for Lee Valley, and a couple of things I'll go check out there. Thank you. And next, George, are you ready to take the piece and take the stage here? And
well, if you're ready for me, yeah.
We are, yeah. So I think we're on good timing here. We'll give you the floor and the piece.
Okay, I just first I wanted to thank my daughter for bailing me out technically here, because I'm a total dinosaur on the computer. And Nicola's an orca biologist. She's been working up in Robson Bight. Anyway, my claim to fame is that I have my sculpture permanently censored at Capilano University. It's a long story, but I actually see that as an honor. And I was at the last carving festival and witnessed Joe David's pole raising event. And seeing his dedication to his chiefs and elders and ancestors is truly enlightening. And I really admire the whole idea of a festival that's dedicated to carving, because carving, I mean, it's alive and well here on the coast, but in many cultures, like lost languages, they're diminishing, especially since the turn of the century, when from the 19th to the 20th century, when concrete came in and everything is fabricated with sheets and layers. The world became fabricated rather than carved. And my work has brought me around the world to meet Indigenous peoples that never stop carving, like here on the coast. And it's very inspiring. When I left art school, by the way, art school was totally conceptual. I had a few older instructors that were interested in the traditions. They were trained in Europe, and they were at war with the young conceptualists and minimalists at the time, because to work with the figure was passé, and to carve, oh my God, dinosaurs carved. I mean, nobody carves anymore. Why would you want to do that in an art school? Yeah. So anyway, I was up against that whole attitude. But my grandmother had left money for me, $1,500 to go to university. So after art school, my mother suggested I take that $1,500 and enroll in university, maybe become a dentist or some real job, So anyway, I took that money and I bought a big block of marble. There it is. And I bought all the tools I needed to get started with my career. And I carved an image of a woman reflected. Now there on the right, you see the plaster, right? On the left, you see the marble. And you can see these extensions coming off the knees and the elbow. They were cemented in to a cement slab, which held everything together. The idea of scaling up a plaster initially and then carving from that was really important to me, because the complexity of the form I was after required, that kind of reference. So there's the marble carving. The interesting thing is that I felt like I had listened to both types of instructors at art school, because when you look at that, okay, it's figurative, it's tradition, it comes out of those European traditions of the body, but it created a kind of a sense of a mirror in the room. You almost wanted to put your hand out and feel where the mirror is at waist level across the space. So it was conceptual, even though it was figurative. And by the way, it was totally influenced by my experiences in Germany working at the cathedral restoration projects. The Germans never stopped carving because they had to restore the cathedrals, which were rotting because of acid rain and were damaged during the war when the Americans were using them as target practice, from airplanes. So, there was it was fascinating to take these old methods of pointing and apply them to my own work. By the way, that piece is influenced by the idea of a six-pointed star, and it ties in with Greek mythology. They believe the first meteorites that fell to Earth were the first gods, and that they seeded life on Earth. And in fact, in modern science, they believe that is what happened in terms of enzymes, creating growth on Earth. Anyway, when I was in art school, I went to my ancestors' homeland and I followed around. I searched out my roots, and I was really inspired by these early pieces from the Black Death. It was a plague in Europe that killed 1/3 of the population. I know it's nothing like the epidemics the 2 layers of epidemics that swept across North America, but 1/3 of Europeans were killed in that epidemic. And this carved procession I just find these things so amazing. When I go to Europe, I go from cathedral to cathedral, and I'm so impressed at the way these pieces represent the dead. And if I can go back one, I find it interesting the way they'll often represent insects or little animals eating the body. And so the corporeal body is breaking down and turning into new life, a symbol of resurgence. I've spent a lot of time in cathedrals. This was my response to that whole thing. I carved this large fire. It's called pyrolith. And it's basically a huge fire. By the way, that block of marble is from Nootka Sound. It was from an old quarry that was used for the making of the Parliament buildings in Victoria. And I carved these figures that fit inside. They're like the figures on the tombs. And they're suspended inside this honeycomb. And the honeycomb conveys the idea of the transition of matter and fire. This whole piece was my attempt to rectify the differences I felt in beliefs that really belonged here, indigenous beliefs that I could see evolved here, and the import values that my settler culture brought here that didn't fit here at all. And so I was trying to coalesce those differences through my work. This was a room that was built for the piece. There's a big bronze blue heron skull, like a big phoenix that fits on top. Here we are lifting the big granite slab, the altar that the whole piece sits on. That's 6 tons there. We're lifting it into the space. Then I got involved in granite carving. And granite is completely different than marble because it's absolutely impervious to the weather. I mean, you can leave it outside for hundreds of years and it's thousands of years. It's not going to change. So here I am carving this big eye. This was interesting. working in symposia, like where different artists from around the world come and carve together for the summer, is really interesting because I was working against Japanese teams, beside Japanese teams. The Japanese never stopped carving either. You know, they've been carving since time immemorial in their own way. And they carve completely different. I mean, they won't drill a round hole to put a plug and feather in. They'll carve a square hole and use a little wedge to split the stone apart. Very, very different. Anyway, that granite I was carving had white fleck in the black, and it looked like a night sky. And so what I wanted to do was carve a representation of the night sky, the way the sailors would study the stars just when they left Europe for North America. This is the bay that Jacques Cartier left from, by the way. I did a large piece in Sweden. This is called Ette Hogens Ande. It means spirit of the burial mound. And I was working beside Nordic carvers. Their carving traditions are very much alive and well. Here you can see I've roughed out the piece and I'm bushing the surface down. I was, you know, all my pieces have to do with looking at Europe as a mystery. That these sections of anatomy are like pieces of a puzzle, right? And when the viewer walks through this piece, they become part of the composition because they're like people assessing their ancestry, their origins. There's Swedish myths about the giant that emerged out of the glaciers, and he was killed in a battle with his children, and his pieces were spread around, and everybody else wanted high-profile sites around the castle. I chose a location in the forest to convey the passage of time. And by the way, that ear weighs about 1.5 tons. I left it at the carving site, and we carried it to the unveiling site. So it wasn't a pole raising; it was an ear planting. Okay, you know, I actually read a poem into the ear at the event. Anyway, I had this piece in the show, in the last show at the Carving Festival, and it's now in the Bill Reed exhibition at the Bill Reed Gallery. It's the 100th. If Bill Reed was alive, he'd be 100. And I carved this piece as a monument to Bill Reed. And there's a kind of narrative here in that I grew that alder in a knot, and I realized it was like a metaphor for the trickster. I mean, it's a bizarre thing to make a big skew chisel with a knot in the handle. And then for safety, it needed a table. So I made this big table. It's all carved. Some people actually thought it was a leather tablecloth. Anyway, it has a trickster's joy, a warrior's toy written on one side. And on the other side, it says, they placed roses beside him while he worked. And there's a silhouette of his canoe embedded into the floor, which represents his you know, Victorian upbringing in Victoria. Anyway, I have a rough time saying goodbye to people, and I find it works when I can do it through carving. By the way, you've got to get down there and see that exhibition. It's going to run right through till the end of the summer. And there's a small dogfish pendant in there. And when you look at the detail on that pendant, you will be gobsmacked. It's unbelievable detail. It's inhuman detail on that piece. Anyway, there's a lot to see. It brought back a lot of memories for me about my time working with Bill Reed, where I really had a 10-year conversation with the man. I've been making a lot of tools, selling them to raise money for the fighting of the Trans Mountain Pipeline. This tool the design came to Bill Reed through Mungo Martin, and it was Mungo's son Dave Martin that first heated up the lips and raised them like that. I know the traditions around the wooden elbow are important because of the flexibility and everything, and you don't have to weld. But Bill liked this particular design, and I make a lot of these, and I've given a lot of them away as a way of saying thank you. two Aboriginal carvers. And a few of these are actually in the show, because I used to do a lot of repair and making of tools for Bill Reed. These are some tools I made up in Skidegate for the carving of the big 50-foot canoe. I actually lived on the beach in front of the carving shed and got to know all those amazing people. By the way, when Bill first came to my studio and asked me to work for him on the Raven and the First Men, I thought it would be a few months and then I'd never see Bill again. I had no idea it was going to turn into a 10-year relationship. And you know, Bill had some interesting quotes. But one of them, he said, dull tools are like dull people. They're a dangerous waste of time. Okay. And, you know, he surrounded himself with interesting people to make his life interesting. Like George Norris, he did the big crab in front of the planetarium. He has public art pieces all across North America. He laminated a big block out of 9 by 9 inch beams in a big factory. And then he roughed the piece out. It was miraculous what he did. And then I met Gu Zhao there. Gu Zhao worked with Bill Reed, defining the overall form of the Raven and the clamshell. And then I, of course, met Jim Hart, who did the surface definition. And you know, I had no idea these two young guys were going to be the most important Haida chiefs in terms of the revival of eagle and raven potlatch culture. There were amazing people that came in the studio and all the time when I was working for Bill, like Bo, Tony Cavelti, Arthur Erickson, Rudy Kovac, Chang Sun, Joe David. Bill used to refer to Joe David as the best draftsman on the coast. And when Joe came to town, Bill would just give him the keys to his car, his house, his studio, whatever was needed to make his time efficient in the city. You know, when I was working for Bill, it was interesting. He was really into body language, right? Like what he was after was the physiognomy. In other words, the reading of the body language. He wanted those figures to feel like they were terrified of the outside world. His only real instruction was don't look at the model. It's not right. You know, the model was way too small for the scale. But what he wanted was those figures had to feel like they were terrified. You know, and that was the real issue there. And he wanted to communicate terror. And I think he recruited me because I was working with really convoluted anatomy in my own work. You know, I included a few shots of Bill's plasters because even though that's casting, sorry, I know this is a carving festival, but we discovered actually during the making of the big whale for the aquarium that all the same tools you use for carving work beautifully on wet plaster as long as you keep it wet. And so these really turned into big carving projects. This was a detail on the mythic messengers. You know, Bill's bestiary was fascinating. You know, he worked with the bear mother, Nangasingik, you know, the man that was chasing the whale to get his wife back. The dogfish shaman, the Wasco. I mean, he'd recycle these compositions throughout his career. Working as a contemporary Haida slave completely changed my worldview. It really informs my practice. And you know, I was really inspired by Bill as an activist. You know, he'd sit on a logging road to stop logging on Lyle Island, or he'd stop working on the Spirit of Haida Gwaii in protest. You know, and you know, I've been inspired by that. I've been working with the Tsleil-Waututh, protecting Burrard Inlet from the Trans Mountain Pipeline. The last 3 years of my life, I've been making art to raise money and to confront the construction of the Trans Mountain Pipeline. I've been arrested. I've defended myself in the Supreme Court, and I was up all night doing a new piece for that. And I'm going to be using it tomorrow on the street. This is a pile of maple in my new studio on Gambrier Island, and I'm ready to start a new carving. And what I want to do, I'm working on a composition of a woman being very intimate with a bear. And it's really inspired by the fact that I've helped Bill with several bear mother compositions. But my approach is highly realist. I'm really inspired by the book by Marian Engel. It's entitled Bear, not The Bear, just Bear. And it's a story about a librarian that falls in love with a black bear, and it takes place in the 1960s. She was a friend of Margaret Atwood, and it's an amazing Canadian novel, an erotic novel about this relationship. So I'm working on this is a small plaster model, and it's really inspired by people like Michelangelo and Rodin and Bernini. By the way, Bernini was the Charles Edenshaw of the Renaissance in Europe. His work was incredible. He did the Ecstasy of Saint Teresa. So this is my ecstasy in Ursus Arctos. And you can see the bear is thrilled. The woman's thrilled. There's a interesting relationship going on there. But what I want to do with this piece is when I laminate it up, I'm going to rough it out because I'm going to model the whole thing in clay, make a full-size plaster like that first piece I did after art school, and actually point the piece out and rough it out and hollow it out as I work my way up, okay? So the piece will be hollow. That will eliminate a lot of the cracking problems that you normally run into when you're laminating pieces together. By the way, I learned a lot of my tool making skills from Bill Kuchin at the art school, who was a Doukhobor Canadian. In his youth, he was punished for speaking the only language he knew, Russian. I'm sure that rings a bell with a lot of people. But he was a profound three-dimensional thinker. When I looked at his work, I was gobsmacked. I couldn't figure out how anybody could think so three-dimensionally, like carving the three graces with their arms wrapped around each other. And he'd carve direct without even reference to full-size models. You know, the reason I got involved in this bear project is because I've been working with a grizzly bear, a live grizzly bear. I had a live grizzly walk on my clay, 4 tons of clay that I, got from all Bill Reed's projects. And I did a casting of the entire event, cast like a night sky. So the bear's walking across his own constellations. But when I was trying to do a sculpture of a bear, I was studying bears in captivity, and I noticed they stepped in their own tracks like they do in the wild. I've been working for years now with the grizzly, with live grizzlies, with grizzly imagery, and I'm interested in the fact that these myths from around the world are aligning themselves with modern science now. Like part of our DNA is absolutely identical to grizzlies. So these creation stories are real, and well, anyway, I think I've covered a fair bit of ground here. A lot of my carving, it has to do with, well, it's integrated with casting. It isn't specifically carving, so I tried to focus on the carved pieces today. But I certainly am looking forward to my new studio over on Gambier Island. It's a huge studio with a full machine shop and a wood shop. My son lives there full time already. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
George, thank you very much. That was
Thank you, George.
that was quite an adventure you just took us on there. Wonderful stories. It's great to hear all your contributions and times. It's good to be in the presence of a contemporary Haida slave. Didn't know there was such a thing, but now
It was an honor being a slave.
That was very generous of you to share that. Thank you very much. wow, I'm just kind of sitting back and admiring the range of things we've heard here this afternoon. It's quite extraordinary. And one of the gifts of the festival is hearing the stories and seeing into the different worlds that some of the carvers and artists and occupy here. It's quite wonderful. I feel like I have learned so many little gems from each of you. Thank you very much for giving of your time. I think that we had hoped to have a bit more of a Q&A. Seeing here that we're probably going to be a little bit short on time to do that. I think the suggestion was just to read off some of the feedback here that was coming in. So we're seeing comments in here like the very generous thank you, Dorian. I'm going to kind of go through the chat history here a little bit. Joshua, your cat is a guest star. Yes, very good. Nuu-chah-nulth is very good. Thank you. Scrolling through the chat here. Maybe can we just do a question or two, Helen, do you think? I mean, I'm not sure yet. Do we have like one or two burning questions from the audience that someone wants to put forward that maybe got put in the chat here? We really gave ample time for our artists to speak, but is there a question someone wants to jump in and throw their hand up and ask? Okay, I'm just kind of scanning the chat here. Unless someone wants to jump in, are there questions coming in here? I'm not sure who those are directed to. Is it? Someone's got a hand up.
Yeah, I wanted to, can you hear me?
Yes, can. Thank you. Yes.
I wanted to ask Joshua what you were singing in your myth tale. Was it actually a song or?
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh.
Yeah, that is a song. I'll tell you a little story about how I kind of came to put that in there. So one day, like I worked in a language nest for about 4 years here in Port Alberni and Nuu-chah-nulth Language Nest. And one day, my mentor, she told that story, and I'd often ask her, like, can you tell that story again? Because each time she would tell it a little bit different. And one day she started singing. And then later on, I asked her, I'm like, where did that song come from? And she's like, oh, I just made it up on the spot. And I was like, oh, that's so awesome. And then it like inspired me to want to put a song in. And in the nest, we were singing that song. And let me see. I think it comes from Quetzino people. I could be wrong. I should know this. I'm sorry, I feel a little bit bad here. But it's a song that's shared up and down the coast, and different nations sing it and sort of put their own little twist on it sometimes. And so it's kind of like, like songs usually belong to people or families, and usually you have to have permission to use them. And this song has been shared quite a bit, so I felt quite comfortable to use it in this story. And yeah, and it was just like, part of it was like for my own growth too, because like I'm afraid to sing in front of people, and through my language learning, it's really forced me to like have to do it. And so when I'm around the kids, I'm just like, there's no fear, because I'm like, these kids love you. They're not going to judge you. They're not going to be like, hey, Josh, you don't know how to sing. So with the kids, I felt really comfortable, and they helped me grow. And really, that's what it's about, right? It's about hard work and growing and learning to accept yourself and love yourself. And let go of the shame of colonization and all these different things that have happened, and just to move forward. It's like, yes, horrible things happened, but we have the power to move forward. And that's really what I want to do. And I want to, my greatest hope is just to inspire other people, that they realize that they can do it too. Like, if we can all do it. We're all capable.
Well done.
Watch that,
Great job.
I do know, and it was explained to me that when you can really see when the people are dancing that song. It's about the robins when they pull out of the ground. They're listening.
Yeah.
Listening to the birds, and they pull a bird out, and that's what that song is about. It's about the robin.
Yeah. Thank
Great.
you.
Thank you.
Joshua is also available for Nuu-chah-nulth dating tips as well, if I understand how to approach
I've actually tried that before.
dating frog. Could have you.
Unfortunately, the lady didn't understand anything I was saying.
Okay, well, we'll do a session at the next carving festival just on that, how to learn that song.
I actually want to make a book on that, like complimenting your partner, and anyway.
Appreciating and admiring is good skill. All right, well, thank you all very much. We do have 2 more sessions in the Carving on the Edge Festival. I do want to say one more thing before we go that though, because I'm not sure where Joe might be later or where I might be later, but I do want to say a special thank you to 2 people in particular who are here, for those of us in this session. This has been an extraordinary year for many of us, all of us, I presume, with the pandemic, lots of changes. We canceled our festival last year. That we're even doing this is really quite miraculous. Here we are. I really appreciate you all joining and being a part of this, and everyone who's given up their time. This all would not be possible. I'm saying this myself, but also on behalf of the board. I would like to really recognize 2 people here, Hélène Descoteaux and Brianne Dempsey, for their incredible contributions, organizing our programming, wrangling our speakers and artists. The board contributed a lot, and though these 2 very fine, good people did a huge part of the heavy lifting for all of us to be here. So, and I'm not sure who's all going to be around for us to recognize them. Normally we'd close with a bit of a dinner. That won't be possible this year, and I just want to extend my appreciation and regard to both of you, Hélène and Brianne, for saying yes and continuing to support the festival. Thank you. It's really appreciated and seen and admired, and thank you, Kleco, for all of that good work.
I would also like to say thank you all very much. I have to go away to an appointment in Nanaimo tomorrow morning at 9:30, so I think I'm going to leave here probably fairly soon today. It's been a great first virtual festival. Yes, certainly thank you to all that have been organizing behind the scenes, and then of course all of you that have showed up on the screen today. And it's been really uplifting to see everyone here and to share and hear all these different aspects of carving and art and the arts as well. Thank you very much, and I wish you all the best.
Thank you, Joe. Thank you.
For you, Joe.
Okay, so we have one more session this afternoon, Pacific time, for those of you who are joining us at Pacific time. It starts at 4 o'clock. The invitation is in the passport email, the Zoom there. This is going to be an interesting session. It's it's an around the fire, a virtual discussion. This is really an opportunity for carvers and artists to get together and explore ideas. I just want to read this off to you really quickly. Sorry, I'm jumping around here. Where was that? Here we go. So this is an opportunity for a conversation amongst carvers. Almost all of the carvers who come to the festival who can be there in person, who've been there all the years with us prior, they come back, and one of the things they often share most is just the time in the big room and the shore and other locations where the carving festival has held, just to sit and talk and work and connect. A lot of carvers are really solitary creatures, and they'll also really enjoy connecting and sharing stories and tools, certainly. we're going to try and recreate that to some extent here. So this is really going to be a conversation forum led and curated by those of you who are interested in joining and connecting with other carvers and continuing our conversations here. So that's at 4 o'clock. And then be sure to hang around until the end. There's going to be another or a giveaway for the Kestrel tools, the $200 gift cards up for grabs there for those who are able to join. So Kleko again. Thank you for the Taloquiet hosts here. And we will see hopefully some of you again back here at 4 o'clock for the next event and our last day of the virtual 2021 Carving on the Edge Festival. Thank you, Kleko. Have a nice, wonderful rest of your day for those of you whom we don't see. Thank you.
Thank you.